Hi everyone, thanks for tuning in to the annual reporting orientation. I'm Megan Botrytis, and I'm also joined here with Dan to go through the slides and give you an idea of a more in-depth look at what's needed for your annual report this year. So we're going to go over the annual report requirements in depth, where you can find that information. There'll be some helpful links throughout the presentation as well. And then at the end, we'll showcase the new annual reporting tool that we're strongly encouraging our partners to use this year, showing you what that looks like. So to kick it off, who needs to prepare an annual report? So any partner who has received their fully executed CI, which is a CI that has been signed by both UIC and the partner in the year 2020 or 2021, must submit an annual report. So anyone who whose CI is still in review or doesn't have the completed signatures by the end of 2021 will not need to submit a report. These reports are due by January 31st, 2022, and UIC will prepare and submit to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service the annual report based on what you guys have submitted. So to answer your question, if your CI was finalized late in the year and did not allow for full implementation or monitoring, the report is still required, so just summarize the best that you can what has been completed up to this date and any progress that you plan to make in the future. So why do we require an annual report every year? This will summarize the achievements and what the conservation benefits have been throughout this past year, and document any compliance within the agreement and partner-specific achievements. This reports any unforeseen changes or circumstances that you anticipate for the next year. And it's also an opportunity for you to summarize your supplemental conservation measures. So these reporting requirements are summarized in the CCAA. The sections are listed there if you kind of want a deeper look into what is required as outlined in the CCAA itself. So some important points we want to make while you're preparing your annual report. Annual reports are the primary way to demonstrate compliance and highlight any unique circumstances or achievements that you've accomplished over this past year. We strongly encourage the new online reporting tool, which I'll show you what that looks like at the end, to help us at UIC streamline the review process. If you cannot use this online reporting tool, as we're rolling it out, in December, you are required to use the template instead, which is located on the CCAA toolkit. And with that, I'll pass it over to Dan.
Great, thank you, Megan. Okay, so now I'd like to get into some of the content needs of the annual report to help you as you're preparing those reports to think through what you need to provide there. So for the first part of the report, we just need your basic information, your organization and contact information, your CI number that was issued when your application was approved, as well as then the enrolled lands acreage that you have included in your CI, and then your adopted acres target, as well as the actual contribution, because we know a lot of partners end up actually exceeding their target. We want to know both what that target is and what you contributed. So you find that information, of course, in your certificate of inclusion, as well as if there is updated contacts, things like that, you want to include that in there as well. So Beyond your basic contact information and organization contributions, we also want to have a summary of your annual net conservation benefit contributions. And so that is provided in a few ways. One is the compliance tracking data sheet. So there's a data sheet, or if you have that similar data in a shapefile or documentation of conservation measures, we want to provide that documentation of how you got to those adopted acres that you delivered under the past year within the CCAA. We want you to provide a short narrative within the annual report that describes what you did, which conservation measures you used to achieve that adopted acres target, and where those were applied, and if there were any changes from the previous year or from your application and how you went about implementing those. It's also helpful to know just anecdotally if there's areas where there was implementation or benefits that deviated from anticipation direction. So if you had unanticipated responses from vegetation or notable sort of observations in the field, we want to know that type of thing along with just the basic what you did and generally where it occurred. Along with that, if there were unforeseen circumstances or changed circumstances, right? In section 10 of the CCAA, there's different situations that could arise. We also have a section that talks about those unforeseen and changed circumstances that may have occurred. We want you to sort of identify those in your annual report, things that would have affected your implementation somehow. This is also the place where you want to summarize what you did from a supplemental conservation measure standpoint. So if you undertook any of those other supplemental measures that are identified in section 6 of the CCAA, we want you to highlight those here and describe what it was and the documentation you provided. So again, we want to see that tracking sheet that summarizes your adopted acres, as well as you can pull all that information together from your own internal reporting, from your treatment records or other data that you have that is feeding into the summary that you provide in your annual report. So to find that compliance tracking template, which is again a spreadsheet that allows you to easily fill out what conservation measure you applied, how many acres of it, where that occurred, that template is found within the toolkit under the tracking and reporting tab, like you see highlighted here. Okay, along with that delivery of those adopted acres and the conservation measures, you are asked per the CCAA to identify the extent of potential partner overlap in your adopted acres. So again, this is adopted acres, not enrolled acres. So the areas where you're doing conservation measures, you're asked to note to what extent you had overlap with those adopted acres with another partner enrolled in the CCAA. And so there's two ways you can do that. You can coordinate directly with those overlapping partners to determine if they indeed counted adopted acres in the same locations that you are, or you can quantify by making sort of an estimate of overlap in those acres based on your knowledge of their operations and their CCAA involvement. So if you do want to read more on that, the section highlighted here, section 14.1.1 in the CCAA is where you can find information on that. If you want to know who else is enrolled in the CCAA, so other partners that are there that might have overlap within your footprint, UIC has a list of enrolled partners and the states within which they operate that is summarized on this box.com site linked here. And so that is accessible to all the CI holders, upon enrollment that you can access that. It has contact information for those other partners that operate in the states where you do. I think an important thing to remember with the overlap is that you don't want to subtract the overlap from your adopted acres, right? So if you've delivered, let's say 100 adopted acres and you think you have 10 acres of overlap, you don't want to report 90, but you want to report your full 100 acres that you delivered in conservation on those acres. But just note that you've had 10 acres of overlap. That helps UIC as we roll up all the partner data and summarize in that annual report to Fish and Wildlife Service the degree to which there was perhaps overlap across those adopted acres, so that Fish and Wildlife can account for that in that overall CCAA program contribution in adopted acres to benefit the Monarch. So important distinction there. I just wanted to call attention to that. Make sure you're not subtracting your overlap. You're just noting what percent or what amount of acres could be overlapping. Okay, so the supplemental conservation efforts, these are the conservation measures that, again, don't contribute to adopt acres, but might be important things that you're doing to support monarchs. And so, again, these are in Table 6.5 within the CCAA. And by participating in one or more of these to the minimum requirements that are required for their deductions in the toolkit, you can actually have benefits towards your annual administrative fee, right? So these can result in deductions on your fee if you've completed them in that year that you're reporting on. So if you are considering looking at that, I suggest you look at this table, verify that it aligns with one or more of these supplemental measures, and then also look at the minimum requirements reference that's within the toolkit. So as I mentioned, those do contribute to deductions for the upcoming year on your annual administrative fee. So you can see here the percent deductions that would be realized from completing those supplemental measures. And again, the documentation that you need to provide to achieve that discount is available on this guidance document linked here on the toolkit. Okay, so another major component of the annual report is the summary of your monitoring conducted. And so here, again, we need to provide alongside with your annual report the monitoring locations and results. So we need a map or data showing where you conducted monitoring, and then a summary of what those results were. And so we want the a summary, and there's a spreadsheet again on the toolkit that you can summarize your monitoring data, the number of milkweeds you observed, whether or not you exceeded the milkweed target, depending on which part of the country you're in, or the nectar plant threshold. That allows you then to summarize, again, within a short narrative within the report, what was the method that you used for conducting monitoring, what your results were generally, overall, when you take all of your data points together. Lessons learned that you found from taking that data. I mean, having that time in the field to look at areas that you are undertaking those conservation measures allow you to learn from what those management efforts that you have undertaken are doing on the landscape and what kind of habitat you have. And in cases, sometimes it can allow you some learning and identifying maybe issues that you need to follow up on, or trends that you might be seeing based on maybe weather that year, or the types of conservation measures you're using. So it's important to note those in your samples as you're taking those. I think there's a lot to be learned there. So aggregating all that monitoring data allows you then to also identify whether or not the adaptive threat management threshold is triggered as a result of your monitoring data. So you might recall in your original application, as well as in the CCAA, if less than 90% of your plots don't achieve the target, or you don't achieve the targets within that 90% confidence interval, depending on which sort of way you're looking at your data, that would trigger adaptive management. And so that requires you to then go through that learning process to think about what could have been done differently with your conservation measures or your monitoring, if anything, and then identify sort of how you might adjust that in the future. So we want you to note that, and if you are, give some ideas on how you might approach adaptive management in light of triggering that threshold. So again, we have an effectiveness monitoring data calculator, or spreadsheet tool that's available on the toolkit. So you can access that there. There is also then a calculator which you can use to evaluate whether or not you've achieved those adaptive management thresholds. Both of those, so that the reporting template and the calculator are both found under the monitoring tab within the toolkit. So you can access those there. And again, that should make your data analysis and follow-up hopefully simple and straightforward for you. Okay, so one question we've gotten from some partners is, what if they were unable to complete any or all the monitoring over the past year? This is a good question. This happens, I think, for various reasons. I would say if for some reason you deviated from what your monitoring was, let's say you had to sample 30 or 50 plots, and due to some other urgent or imminent need, you had to you can only sample a portion of that. We want to know where those areas may have deviated from your planned implementation, and then why. So if you had a certain monitoring visit plan, but it was delayed for some reason, we want you to note that and why. This would also apply to other aspects of implementation. So if your conservation measures or adopted acres didn't work out as expected, we want you to note similar within your annual report. Your annual report is really where you want to tell the story of what happened over the past year, and if it met your expectations or if it changed for some reason. So make sure you think about that as you're writing up your narratives and your summary that you're providing. If you do find yourself unable to complete monitoring, we want to note how that will be addressed in the upcoming year. We saw this a lot, especially in the first year of the CCAA implementation with COVID-19 restrictions and work limitations, delays. Of course, there was a lot of adaptation in that year, and so that was in a lot of cases adjusted for this year and addressed. And we expect to get a good amount of monitoring data this year. We're looking forward to that. I should also say, as we think about this and look ahead to the coming year, I know we're looking at, for many of you, right, there could be timing limitations if your certificate of inclusion was approved late in the year. I would say 9 times out of 10, that is the reason why we don't get effectiveness monitoring conducted in a given year. Would be if a CI is approved, say in November, of course, that gives you really no time to mobilize people to get out and do monitoring. Obviously, especially at the peak of the growing season before the end of the year. So if that's the case, if your CI was approved after August 1st, then and you were not able to go out and conduct monitoring, note that as part of your summary, that it was approved later in the year and you weren't able for that reason to conduct monitoring at those optimal periods of the year. Okay. All right, and then one of the last portions of the annual report is the forecast. So looking ahead to the coming year, do you expect to repeat the same effort as you go into the coming year, or will there be changes of some kind? And so while you can make changes to your CI at any point, we do suggest that the annual report is a good time of year to think about and consider making those changes if this is a good time of year to do that. And so that might be things as simple as changing the contact for your organization. In some cases, it might be adding or removing adopted acres or the extent of your enrolled lands. I know some of you, periodically are requested to update your CIs or your Section 7 documentation based on the biannual reinitiation that Fish and Wildlife conducts on the CCAA agreement. And so if you have those types of changes, you want to note that in your forecast, that you anticipate that you're going to make those changes and then follow up with UIC accordingly from there. We did provide earlier this year a guidance document on how to go about making those modifications to make that, again, as simple and straightforward for you. And so as linked here within the toolkit is this guidance document that you see here, which also includes this CI modification form. So for certain changes, we want you to complete that form, and you may or may not need to provide other documentation along with that, depending on the type of request that you have. Okay, so in short, here's a checklist of some of those requirements that you need to have as part of your annual report. So you can refer to this as you're compiling those reports and providing that information. And from here, Megan, I'll pass it back to you, and you can show us the example of the online form for this year.
Okay. I think next then is to do a demo of the updated online reporting tool. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and Megan, if you want to take control and let us demo, that'd be great.
Okay. Okay, so hopefully you guys can see the first page you see when you click on the link. So this is where you'll sign in. And this uses the same credentials as the Rights of Way Working Group website. So if you don't have credentials yet, there is also a button to register. And just so you guys know, that is a manual process on our end, so you won't get your credentials right away. So if you need a login right away, please reach out and we'll prioritize getting you your credentials. But it usually takes a day or two. So once you sign in, this will normally be blank, but I have tested this before, so it does already have information in here from what I've previously put in. So you'll put your organization name. The certificate of inclusion number is important that you put it as it is in your CI, or if you've had a CI modification using that most current number. So it will probably be similar to the first one you received, but with an updated number at the end to indicate it's the second version or third version. So it's important you put that in here as it is on your CI or your modified CI. You'll put your information, address, phone number, email, and then once that's put in, you can proceed to the next tab. This is all required information, so you won't be able to move forward. For acres enrolled, adopted acres target, these have just a little check involved. So once you enter in your number, it will either not give you any sort of a message if your enrolled acres match what we have on file. But for instance, the example I put in, it says that our records indicate your enrolled acres should be this amount. So if there's a discrepancy, you can add some additional details below on why that discrepancy is. Maybe you need to submit a CI modification request, or if you typed in your CI number wrong, it might let you know that we don't have that CI number on file. Either way, you can let us know if you're having issues, but you can move forward. It's just a little check to let you know if things are matching what we have as well, to make sure that people aren't rounding or whatnot. And then here you'll put how many actual adopted acres were contributed in 2022. And then here put any kind of additional explanation or comments related to adopted acres. So I'll just put a little test. And then next. And you'll see that there is a Save Responses button here. So you should be able to log out. and then log back in. And then what you put will be there. So when in doubt, just press the Save Responses button, but it does save when you log out, and it should also be saving responses automatically if something happens in the middle of reporting on this tool. Select your conservation measures that you did in 2022. And then here you're going to upload the different files. So we do have links to, for example, here we want the compliance tracking table. So once you fill it out, you could upload that here. So I'll just put in some sample information. So you can either delete that if you uploaded the wrong one, and you can also upload multiple files if you need to. And then some more descriptions here. If you did any supplemental measures in 2022, please check those off here and make sure that you're uploading any documentation that's needed here, and any sort of narrative that's needed. Here's a link to the guidance document on what's needed for each of those supplemental measures. Any updates to your avoidance minimization measures, and then, you know, if you did update something, you can upload that here. It's, you know, a lot of these are not required, so, you know, if you didn't upload your Section 7 documentation, you're not required to upload something here. Then you'll just continue through here, summary of effectiveness monitoring. You can upload your map here, you know, summarizing your monitoring results here, a narrative on how that went, uploading your effectiveness monitoring here. Again, we've included a link on where you can find that. Adaptive management triggered, yes or no, and then a narrative on that adaptive management. More narrative, and then your upcoming year forecast. So if you have any changes you want to make to your CI, you can include that here. If you want to add, you know, a conservation measure, for example, or change your enrolled acres, or change the point of contact on the CI, you can let us know here so that we can be sure to reach out to you. Any sort of general comments you want to let us know about your annual report this year, such as, you know, my CI was issued in August, so I wasn't able to conduct monitoring, or we ran into these sort of issues. Or, you know, if you have any suggestions on how to improve the annual reporting tool, we'll also take those into account if you think something would be helpful. And then any other documentation, you can upload that here. So then when you get to the end, you'll see a summary of each of those sections here. So you can, if, you know, anything doesn't look right or doesn't capture exactly what you want, you can always go back. And then here you can also download a report summary, either in CSV, or if you want more of the, you know, print version of it. We have these two options here. So the CSV is just a spreadsheet with those different responses here, so you can, you know, see, have a copy of what you've put into the tool, or if you want more of this view, you can save that, kind of a view of how it looked on the website. And then when you're done and everything looks good, and like I mentioned, you can log out and log back in and fill this out over time. But once you're done and finished, you press the done. And if everything was filled out, which I didn't fill everything out completely, they should all be green check marks as kind of a last check that everything will be there. And then just reminders about making sure that you have a copy of your compliance tracking sheet, your effectiveness monitoring spreadsheet, a map displaying locations where monitoring was conducted, and any documentation necessary to support any supplemental measures you did for discounts if you did any. And then just click I certify, and then you'll submit here. And it's posting to our website where it's all stored.
I'll just
add,
sorry, securely stored, Megan. So this isn't publicly available information.
Yes. So any questions on the tool or anything you want me to go over again?
I think this is a helpful orientation, Megan. Thanks for doing that. One question I'm just thinking over here is, since the saving is tied to the account, and I'm thinking of like contractors and consultants here that are helping, in some cases maybe more than one CCAA partner. If they're submitting multiple reports, should they do that via maybe different individuals with different accounts? Or, can they submit multiple reports via a single account?
So it is tied, like you said, to the login information. So what they've entered in here will display logging out, logging in, submitting, just the one time. So if one user needs to submit multiple reports, I don't know if that's really a possibility in the tool as it is. So potentially they could fill out the template for their clients, and then their client could enter the information on the online reporting tool. I guess that would be my suggestion right now, but I can check with who built the tool and see if there's another solution.
Okay. Yeah, I think there's probably a couple different ways to kind of work around that issue. I was curious in your thoughts there, so thanks. I think it's a good suggestion. I see Michael has, I think, a similar question. Can multiple individuals or accounts within an organization work on the same report, or is the electronic report only accessible and editable for the one account?
Yeah, just the one account, so it's tied to your login credentials, this version. But maybe that's something we can work on for next year.
Mm-hmm.
And Michael, I would suggest if there's interest to have, let's say the draft annual report reviewed by other people within your organization, we do have Word document templates that contain all the same sort of pieces of information that get uploaded into this. That's available on the toolkit. And so you can always draft your report in a Word document there before it gets uploaded. You can simply copy and paste into this form.
Or another suggestion is you can fill it out or fill out the sections that you want to do, and you can download it here and then send it over to someone else in your organization who's intending to fill the rest out and submit.
And I'll just add, we did talk about, this save function was one of the opportunities for improvement that we heard from users last year. So we are excited that we were able to build in, some capacity for that this year. But we had some internal discussion around, should the save function be associated with your user account versus the organization name, and thought that there might be some confusion if it was associated with the organization name, again, maybe with multiple users starting to fill out certain fields in the form and then editing each other's or overwriting each other's input. So we felt it was maybe safer to do it by the username. But this couple line of questioning, I think, Dan, the example you gave about maybe a consultant helping multiple organizations with their reports, or Mike, your thought about multiple people within a single organization wanting to work on the same report makes me think that we might want to look at changing that, again, tie to be associated with the organization name as opposed to the user account. So interested in further thoughts on that. And as Megan said, maybe that's something that we can build into the functionality for next year.
Yeah, and this is the first year we're using this site that we've built. So there's, I'm sure there's lots of opportunities for improvements. So if you get to the end of your annual report and you have ideas, yeah, you can drop them in this section here, and we can just improve as the years go on.
I think this is a great tool nonetheless. So thanks to you and everybody there who put it together.